So we must do two things, two great things together, to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself. So where are we? We have been taking Revelation, and we made quite a bit of progress yesterday afternoon, but I think we need to review what we have seen. What have we seen? John begins by showing us that everything is in the fore. Everything is in the calculus. And that there is no revelation without that calculus. No revelation without the fore. And so he shows that process of revelation. He says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him. And so we have the word sense that all revelation is from God. And all revelation will be the revelation of God and of the Christ. That as the Christ, all revelation is translated and manifested by the Christ. It says to show John what shortly must come to pass, what must come. I love that must. This is a divine must. It is the Christ must, that which must will come to pass. Nothing will stop the manifestation of that new vision, that new revelation. And all revelation is translated and manifested by the Christ. It will be translated to each one by the Christ, manifested within each individual consciousness by the Christ. And then Christianity, that all revelation is reflected in you, reflected in the individual consciousness, reflected in the whole of consciousness in Christianity. And finally, a touch of science, that all revelation is actually nothing but the understanding of those facts which are eternal, the eternal facts of being. The time is at hand. The time is at hand to see that which is. And then he shows the source of revelation. Having given the process, he says the source is the Word and the Christ. The source of the new revelation, the new vision of Christianity and science is the Word and the Christ. And so he speaks of that infinite one, from him which is and which was and which is to come. That is the source, isn't it, of everything. The source of all revelation is always that infinite one principle. From the seven spirits which are before his throne, so that one is a seven, that one principle is seven, and from Jesus Christ, and it is the four. So to say in our terminology that the source of all revelation is the infinite one principle, and that one principle is the seven and the four. And he shows really those seven to have an ascending way of development, shows them in their ascending way. He says, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And we could see that this is exactly how we first perceive that word, isn't it? That we perceive it as the days of creation, a days of creation sense, a sense of a beginning, that something begins, that there is a first light, an initial light, the breaking in of a new light. But then he goes on and he says, I am Alpha and Omega. I'm the same thing. I'm Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. So that we see that those days, that sense of a beginning and an ending, is being lifted. Actually, it is lifted because the four-fold calculus is from the beginning built into the Word, built into those days. And so there's an ascending view of what those seven are. And we see that the Alpha and Omega become for us the first and the last. They begin to take on their sense of infinity, numerals of infinity, first and the last. And finally he says, and I turned, as though to say, and I changed my standpoint again, still looking at the same object, still looking at God, still looking at the Word, and I saw 7 golden candlesticks, meaning that even the first and the last takes on a higher and higher meaning for us as we come into the sense of what those 7 synonymous terms are. And in the midst of those 7 synonymous terms is the idea of those 7 synonymous terms. In the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks, he saw the Son of Man. As we know that principle and its idea can never be separate, that where the principle is, the idea is, that where those 7 are, the idea of those 7 are. And so we find our own being as the idea of those 7 synonymous terms. So he presents us with the way of understanding. Isn't that beautiful? It's the ascending way that we all go. And then he goes on to the Christ sense, as though to show us that the 7 are ever operating through the Christ. And therefore, through the Christ translation, and presents us with that Christ translation as messages to 7 churches. It's really one 7-fold message to consciousness. The 7-fold message epitomizing the operation of the Christ to each consciousness, and showing us that the Word, that Word that we have seen now, is not just there, not just static, but that it is dynamic. It is working within consciousness, moving within consciousness. It is the divine message from God to man. And that the Christ is establishing in us as consciousness the true idea of church. Actually, we know what that church is, the structure of truth and love. And this is the whole intent of the Christ to establish that perfect church, that perfect structure of consciousness as the structure of truth and love. It is that consciousness now which will be able to entertain Christianity and science. So we have those 7 churches in the Christ order. That first church of principle, that first message of principle to consciousness, saying, don't leave your first love. Don't leave science. If you return and ever return and refine your love, your first love, that then you will have the tree of life. You will have the tree, you will have the principle, you will be at one with the principle, and that tree, that principle, is the principle of life. And so we see that principle moves on to life, to that message, to consciousness from the standpoint of life, to be faithful to your true individuality, that out of that first love comes your true individuality, and that by being true to ourselves, we win the crown of life. We have the crown of life. Then he goes on to truth and says, dwell in the standard of truth. Stay with that word, stay with that principle, with that first love of science. And that will be for you the standard of truth to dwell in. And that will always give you the hidden manna. It will give you the bread of truth. It will always give you manna. You see that? It's that marvel that every day, remember that manna had to be new. It came from heaven. It had to be new every day. You couldn't hold it over. It had to be fresh. A fresh vision, a new vision always comes out of that standard of truth. And he says you will have something else, that white stone. That first touch of the new consciousness, the consciousness that reflects the whole of truth. And in the stone, a new name, your individual name, your individual Christ consciousness. And so he goes on to love and would tell us to be sure not to entertain any false womanhood, to lift up your womanhood sense. And that actually, by being true to principle, life, and truth, your true womanhood sense will come forth. It will begin to displace and replace anything within consciousness that isn't of the nature of true womanhood. And that this will give you power over nations. It will give you the morning star, divine science. And this we will see when we come to the 12th chapter in the Apocalypse, that the woman really does have that morning star. She has the idea of divine science. And then he goes on to soul and says, watch, always watch, be true to your identity now, This is your identity. You see that principle, life, truth, love, builds up your identity. And that by being true to that identity, your name is written in the book of life, and it can't be blotted out, can't be smudged, it can't be blurred. It is definitely there. And then he comes to Spirit, to that church at Philadelphia, and says, the door is open before you. That principle, life, truth, love, soul, opens the door, to the whole realm, the new realm. Hold fast to that which you have, because with it comes the key of David, the key of Spirit. That key of David, we know, is the 7 and the 4. We know that Mrs. Eddy took that rendering, the key of David, that openeth, no man shutteth, and shutteth, and no man openeth, and she put that right at the beginning of her key to the Scriptures. So to say that key of David is the key now that I'm going to give you to the Scriptures. And what does she give us but the 7 and the 4? And so we are being coded, being equipped with that key of David. Don't lose that crown. And as you adhere to that, you become a pillar in the temple. You become just integrated into that structure of life, truth, and love. You become one with that ideal, the very ideal of the principle, as life, truth, and love is coming forth within you. It's being reflected within you. And so everything just comes with power, the power of the Christ to the point of mind, to the complete manifestation of that open door of consciousness at the point of mind, of the full coincidence within us, full coincidence with the Christ and with the Word, where we have no other mind but the mind of Christ. Isn't that a beautiful flow? And it is all practical for us today. Let's just go through it again and see that everything begins with the Word, that behind that Word is the Christ, that within that Word is the Christ, that behind the 7 days of creation, behind the numerals of infinity, lie the 7 themselves, the principle, the law of the Word, so that no matter where we are, you see, no matter if we are still reasoning, calculating in terms of light and firmament and dry land and sun, moon, and stars, or if we're calculating in terms of wisdom and purity and spiritual understanding and spiritual power and so forth, or if we're calculating in terms of intelligence and order and identity and system, or if we are calculating in terms of mind, spirit, soul, principle, life, truth, and love. It is always the 7. It is always those 7 synonymous terms. Always the one principle, the infinite principle. Always the law of the Word that is there. But how does that Word operate to be what it is, to act as what it is. That brings us to the Christ, to seeing that those seven are permeated with the four. And so the Word says, I am the Christ. I am principle. I, the Word, am the Christ. I'm my own power of manifestation. I'm my own power of manifestation. You don't have to manifest me. You don't have to make me work. You can't set me into motion and into operation. You can't apply me. I am self-applying, self-working, self-operating. I am moving everything. I'm moving the whole of consciousness. I'm moving even your thought processes. I'm moving the whole world. And I'm apodictical. I'm apodictical. I'm not going to allow you to deviate from your first love. I'm not going to allow you to leave your first love. What is that first love? It means that we are coded, we are patterned from eternity with this principle. As though principle would say, you are coded from eternity with me, you are me, my own idea, and this is the eternal fact, and you're never going to get away from it. You cannot leave your first love. And when I operate as the Christ, I am evolving this remnant in you. I'm evolving this first love in you so that it is going to grow and overtake the whole system of consciousness, because it is the seed within itself. And it has the quality to auto-catalyze itself, because it's me. And I'm the calculus, I'm the four. So don't try to apply the human mind to the vision, to the new vision. Don't become problematic over science, over the new idea. Just open up. Just open up. Open up to the field. Remember that seed that falls into the field. Open up to the field. Become one with that field. Open the door. I'm bringing every new view of myself, and I'm bringing it with power. Bringing it to manifestation. To manifestation to the point of absolute coincidence, so that the human mind goes out and is retranslated into my mind, into the one mind, the mind of Christ. So we can't figure out things. We can't figure out spiritual things with the abilities of the human mind. Only the mind of Christ can do that. So principle says, so stay with science, adhere to science, return to science. Take the methods of science, not guesswork, you see, not speculation, but the lawfulness of the system of science, the categories of science. As though principle would say, don't try to apply something to me. We can't apply something to principle from outside. But I alone apply to myself. I apply to myself. And I am life. I, principle, am life. I am irrepressible. I'm breaking down every wall, every obstruction, anything within you that would rebel against this idea, that wouldn't accept this idea. I just flood consciousness with the flood of life, the whole of life. Think of the purifying power of this Christ, flooding us with principles, new idea, and we can't resist it. We don't know what has to go within us. Or we may know and we may have closed our eyes to it. But that principle is a principle. It's the scanner. It's scanning everything and knows how to remove every obstruction. No obstruction will stand. And so there's no door within us that can hold, that can remain closed, that life is bursting through with the bigness of that principle. No false identity, no false individuality, no idiosyncrasies, nothing within our character that is against that Christ will be able to stand. We won't be able to stop it. And so, principle says, I am truth. I'm not only irresistible, I'm irrepressible. I'm not only irrepressible as life, but I'm irresistible. Truth. And I'm making this idea conscious, bringing it to consciousness, making every individual conscious of it. I'm a conscious power, overturning and overturning and overturning. That's why there's movement. That's why there's activity. That's why there is the perception of turbulence. And it's not a bad sign to be overturned. It's a sign of my calculus at work, principle says, to give you a new stone, to give you a new calculus, to give you the same consciousness, that consciousness that is white, that reflects me perfectly in all aspects. So I am working and reworking consciousness. And I, principle, am love. My intent is to establish myself everywhere. This is love, isn't it? What love intends to do through the Christ order is to establish the Word everywhere, to establish that one ego everywhere, to establish that ideal of life, truth, and love everywhere with all nations. To be universal in the individual consciousness, to be universal in the collective consciousness, to be universal in the universal consciousness. And to bring out that womanhood, that true womanhood that will welcome the idea, love the idea, nurture the idea, that will be the womb, the consciousness womb, the consciousness matrix for the new vision, the new idea. So the idea you are beginning to see, principle says, it's love's idea. And it has the power of the whole plan behind it. Just think of that. The idea that we see this week is love's idea. And it has the power of the whole plan of love behind it. And that plan itself is a power. Whenever we return to our first love of science, we see that principle always works according to a plan, has always been working with meaning, with purpose, and that it is a force, that love is a force. Isn't that what the Christ order shows us? That love is forceful, that love will force us to accept what best promotes our growth and the growth of all. It's enforcing all in accord with its attractor, with its idea.